One day, James had to wait at the station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Edward laughed, and James fumed away. After James had finished his work, he went back to the yard and puffed onto the turntable. He was still feeling very bad-tempered. He grumbled to the others. Thomas and Percy were indignant. Said James. Next morning, James's driver was suddenly taken ill. He could hardly stand. So the fireman uncoupled James ready for shunting. James was impatient. Suddenly the signalman shouted. There was James puffing away down the line, called the signalman. Then he told the fireman what had happened. The signalman answered the telephone, wondered the fireman. The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and the rope. Puffed Edward. James was laughing. He chuckled to himself. Suddenly, he was going faster and faster. He realized that he had no driver. Called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, he caught up with James. Called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding the noose of rope and the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. At last, he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. Chuckled Edward. Whispered James. Replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. He said, Edward.